as it's 8 a.m. and here we are at the intersection once again. It's great to see people coming into this Zoom room this morning. We're going to start with just some announcements so that as many people can get into this room before our briefing as possible. And so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any announcements that are out there. I'm going to give a little announcement, and not a little, maybe a big one, but to the youth portion of Pathways to Hope. And Doug and anyone else can chime into that who might be working on it. But we have over the years in the planning of the Pathways to Hope mental wellness conference that's been happening now for 11 years, organized by the community for all of the community, is happening the last Friday and Saturday of August, 28th and 29th. It's really focused this year on taking action. We've always talked about that, and a lot of many things have come out of that in terms of action, but really seriously focusing on taking that action. Over the years as well, having focus and connection with younger people than many of us has grown in different ways. And last year and this year, both the Saturday, the second day, the 29th, has and will be very focused on youth. And I think they're saying by youth for youth is how it's being planned. And it's meant for anybody. So those of us who are older adults are also more than welcome to come, because there are things there on Saturday for us, but it's a focus on the next generation, the generation that is already here, but it will be leading that Saturday. And so I really want to encourage all of us to come both Friday and Saturday. And I'm assuming that Doug is already putting that link into chat to go ahead and register. And not only to come on that Saturday to offer support, right? That there are people in support of younger people and the struggles that they're going through, and also the solutions that go with that, but also to learn. I learned so much in that portion. So I invite you to register for both Friday and Saturday, Pathways to Hope. And then it's no cost. Bring your teams, really start thinking strategically in terms of taking action where you are and in your work. In terms of mental health, it'll give you time to ways and breakout sessions to further your work and think about it a little differently and where it might intersect with others. Doug, do you want to add anything to my rambling on that?
Well, the Friday, along the theme of taking action, we'll have a panel at noon. We'll have a keynote speaker, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. I put the information in the chat. And she'll talk about doing difficult things in difficult times. And we will be talking about how does Bexar County begin to look forward, and envision a better mental health care future for our community. In the morning, our kickoff speaker will be Dr. Consuelo Walls-Bass, who is a scientist, an author, and a daughter and a sister. And she will talk about both the insights that she's gotten, that she's shares in her new book about her sister who has schizophrenia. Dr. Bass is graduated from UT Health, is coming back to San Antonio from Houston, and she is an outstanding speaker. So those are two highlights.
Mm-hmm. And we're really putting effort into change makers as well to attend, and stakeholders. So again, be thinking about furthering all of our work, each of our work, where it's at, what changes need to happen in our community, both locally, but on a statewide level, county level, statewide level. It's really a time for strategy. I think that coming together is a strategy in itself, and strategies will be built in those 2 days. So you can register, go ahead and do that while we're here at the intersection today. What's the current registration, Doug? You're muted, my friend.
Almost 800 as of this morning.
That's great, because those of us who are hoping to plan that, I don't know what the words, I don't want to be gambling, but we did kind of take bets on what that number would end up being, and my number is 2,000. So help me out. I've got the highest number listed, so let's get to 2,000. I don't know what I win if we get to 2,000, other than a stronger community, and that's really all I care about. So I'm now going to introduce Marty Reyes. She comes to us through the Area Foundation. Sarah Davis mentioned her a couple of weeks ago, and the effort for VolunteerSATX. And there was a lot of interest. And Marty, there are several people too who are with us today who are doing similar work and curious. And so they're going to be asking questions, probably smarter ones than I know to ask. But really looking forward to hearing about what you've been working on, and how it all came to being, and yeah, nuts and bolts. And so I'm lobbing it to you. Thanks for coming and spending your morning with us.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm so excited to be here this morning. If you give me one moment, I'm going to share my screen because I do have a couple slides I want to share with you all today. And if you see me looking away from the camera, it's just because I have a second screen with my presentation. All right.
None of the rest of us know what you're talking about. Go on, I'm sorry.
I am here to talk about a new organization that I founded called VolunteerSATX. So I'll start with a little bit about me. I am originally from Muskegon, Michigan. I moved to San Antonio in 2015, 11 years ago. And I moved to San Antonio to join an AmeriCorps program. And so if you're unfamiliar with AmeriCorps, it's a national service program. AmeriCorps is an independent federal agency under our national government. And I was serving at Sam Houston High School, and it was really my first introduction into what service can look like. And I served for 2 years, and I loved that experience so much. I got to network with so many community resources and nonprofits during that time that it really started my career in the nonprofit field. So I have worked for various nonprofits. I've worked for local, statewide, and national nonprofits, and sort of the theme throughout my career has been volunteer engagement. So I've run different types of volunteer programs, whether they've been traditional volunteer programs. For example, here at Sam Ministries, at our Transitional Living and Learning Center over on Blanco, having people sign up for shift work to serve meals and come in our garden and hang out with the kids, to non-traditional programs where I did an innovative healthcare pilot with dialysis patients and volunteer transportation. I am a certified volunteer administrator. I like to mention this because I am one of 2 certified volunteer administrators here in San Antonio. I'm one of 66 in Texas. And I like to talk about this because I think that I want people to know that there is a certification out there for volunteer engagement professionals, and that there is strategy to what we do. There's research behind what we do. And I'm really a big advocate for just legitimizing our profession as much as we can. And my first volunteer experience was teaching children how to hula hoop. I was probably 13 or 14 years old. It was a community event where the kids needed to be watched. And I'm not sure how it happened, but they had a professional hula hooper in who used to travel with different entertainment groups all around the country. And she taught us how to do some really cool tricks. So that's something that always stays in my mind. My experience throughout my career is that no matter which organization I've been working at, no matter what types of volunteering I've been doing, I noticed that we were all facing the same problems. Whether I was talking to a nonprofit that's a staff of 1, or I was working for an organization that had a budget of more than 20 million, our problems were very similar. And I'm going to go into a little bit about what the volunteer landscape looks like from my perspective. So laying out some of the issues that I've seen is recruitment. 62% of nonprofit CEOs say that volunteer recruitment is a big problem. If you're interested in where this data comes from, it's from the Do Good Institute. It is a little older now, it's from 2023. The Do Good Institute, I believe, is from the University of Maryland, and I'm happy to send you that research. The second is funding. Surveyed funders said they were less likely to provide funding for volunteer engagement. Now, something interesting that this research also found is that nonprofits were less likely to ask for funding for volunteer engagement. So it sort of becomes the circular logic of we're not going to ask for funding because funders don't give it, and funders are saying, well, we don't give it because nonprofits aren't asking for it, so they must not need it. And to kind of give some more context, this survey was for nonprofit CEOs, and the funders were primarily foundations. Technology, there's too many national platforms and there's not a consensus on the best place to post. So I'm not sure how many people on this call are Reddit users, but there is a forum for volunteering. It's a global community, and they have more than 10,000 weekly visitors to that forum. For a short amount of time, I volunteered to be a moderator of that community, and it really opened my eyes to sort of the volunteer perspective rather than just the nonprofit and volunteer engagement professional perspective. One of the things that I saw in that community, there's two things. The first one is that on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, we would get a software developer who would come into the community and say, I have solved the problem with volunteering through my new recruitment platform. It's going to match volunteers and nonprofits, and it's going to solve all of the issues. But there's a lot of problems with these, is that the software developer typically does not have any experience in the nonprofit world or have any understanding of how nonprofits operate or how volunteer programs are run. They're often not discussed with nonprofits. They will go and solicit community feedback from volunteers, and then they'll launch their platform and realize we don't have nonprofit buy-in and that this is actually really difficult for them to use. And there's just so many of them out there. Like I said, this was something I was seeing on a weekly basis come in. The volunteer engagement landscape, two of the most popular quotes that I have heard is people don't want to volunteer anymore. And this is typically when I'm talking to nonprofits about their volunteer program. And then on the volunteer side, I hear all the time is I've reached out to several places about volunteering and never heard back. So this was another one of those things I learned through Reddit, is that we were constantly having volunteers say, I've tried to reach out to the, this place in my city. No one's reached out. Can somebody help me and help me find a volunteer opportunity? And so these two statements seem to be in opposition of each other, but I've learned both of them to be true. Volunteers are having a hard time connecting with nonprofits, and at the same time, nonprofits are having a hard time getting volunteers. And if you do a Google search for volunteer opportunities San Antonio, you will pull up sort of the big nonprofits here in San Antonio, the most well-known ones. But it's really difficult if you are a tiny nonprofit, if you're all volunteer run, if you don't have a volunteer coordinator, and you're just really under-resourced to get the word out about your organization. So I explain all of this to say that there's not one single problem that's affecting the volunteer engagement landscape, and there's not one single solution. It's truly that our ecosystem is not set up for success for nonprofits, for volunteers, and therefore for the community that's supposed to be being served. So as I was going through my career, I kind of felt like I was in the place of I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm running into the same issues over and over again, even if I'm technically moving up in my career and I'm getting a better title and I'm having more responsibility. It just sort of felt very repetitive, and I wanted to be part of the solution. So I started doing some research, and I came across the concept of volunteer centers and became really intrigued. So let me tell you a little bit more about volunteer centers. Volunteer centers exist to develop volunteerism in the community. It's really a broad definition. I learned that volunteer centers exist all over the world. They exist here in the United States, and they all have different approaches to it. Here in Texas, we have 5 independent volunteer centers, and we also have 4 United Way volunteer centers. So what that means is for United Way, if they have dedicated resources towards volunteerism, typically that has gone towards some sort of technology, they're considered a volunteer center. Independent volunteer centers are people like me. who have founded a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to connecting organizations and nonprofits, or to just developing volunteerism in the community. If you're interested in learning more about volunteer centers, I can send you some more resources. Like I said, they exist all over the world, but I became really inspired by volunteer centers specifically in Canada. They do them really well, and they do coordinated efforts with their both local and national governments to use volunteerism to help solve problems, and they really have a collaborative effort there. And I'll talk a little bit more about Volunteer Toronto, which is an organization I met with, and they've kind of inspired me for some of the services that we'll offer. So I'd like to formally introduce you to VolunteerSATX. We are a community-based volunteer center that streamlines volunteerism in San Antonio. And by creating a centralized hub for all things volunteer, we can connect people who want to help with the people who need it. Our mission is to support civic engagement in San Antonio by equipping volunteers and nonprofits with tools, support, and resources to lead collective community change. And our vision is a San Antonio where everyone has the chance to lead, serve, and belong in a community built on shared trust and purpose. So going into who we serve, our first category is nonprofits, and here are some of the services that I'd like to offer. The first one is a custom-built recruitment platform to advertise volunteer opportunities. And I know I just talked about how there are new volunteer platforms that people are trying to build every week. And one of the main issues that I've seen is that none of these platforms are backed by community engagement. Volunteering at its core is one of the most humanizing experiences I think that we can have, just connecting with another person who's in need. And all of these platforms exist without people behind them. They launch platforms to a nonprofit, to a community, and then there's nothing that comes behind it. So the idea behind VolunteerSATX is that we are going to be in the community. We are going to be telling people about our technology. Our technology is not going to be, this software that was made for profit and they're selling to places all over the United States where profit is their bottom line. I can tell you that two of the biggest volunteer matching platforms have recently been bought out by competitors in the last year. So it is a little concerning for the whole volunteer matching landscape. And our solution is that we are going to custom build it. We are in the talks with a software developer who also has his own nonprofit, so he understands this landscape. He's very community focused and creates really amazing products. So I'm really excited about that partnership. We also would like to offer grants for volunteer programs and projects. Many people might not know that there is federal funding that exists for volunteerism. It's called the Volunteer Generation Fund, and volunteer centers in the United States have benefited from that fund in the past. So that is an opportunity that we plan to pursue. But we also would just love to be able to do pass-through funding to help fund volunteer programs, especially for smaller nonprofits who may not have a dedicated volunteer engagement professional to run their volunteer program. We want to do community outreach to recruit volunteers on your behalf. So this is what I think is our biggest selling point to nonprofits, is that you have an extra advocate, you have an extra recruiter in your pocket. If you're struggling with getting a volunteer opportunity filled, we want to be the platform to help advertise that space and to help you brainstorm and find the right connection for you. And then consulting services for volunteer programs. So this kind of ties back to my certification. Many nonprofits are not aware of the best practices, the research-backed data that exists for running volunteer programs, and there are resources out there. And this is something that I would love to help bring to nonprofits and to help them become more efficient, whether that's through brainstorming recruitment and strategy, or it's through optimizing their onboarding and volunteer application process. We can really customize our plans towards different nonprofits. And I will say that volunteer engagement consulting is not a new concept. There are a few out there who are dedicated specifically towards volunteer engagement consulting in the United States, and they tend to work remotely because they serve the whole country. And so it's really valuable to have somebody local who really understands the landscape here in San Antonio to be able to help navigate some of the issues that you might be having. So who we serve, volunteers. So volunteers benefit from VolunteerSATX by having one centralized place to find volunteer opportunities in San Antonio. And I'm not saying that we need to be the only platform, the only people talking about volunteer opportunities, but we do want to be a hub for volunteerism in the community, and we want to be able to connect with other people doing similar work. and bring all of the resources possible of volunteering to our community. We want to bring one-to-one guidance with an advisor who helps find where your volunteer efforts fit best. So this is where I mentioned Volunteer Toronto. They have a volunteer advisor program where people can sign up for a 30-minute Zoom session or go into a local library and speak with somebody who's like a career counselor, but for volunteer opportunities. So you tell them your schedule, I want to bring my kids with me and we're interested in these causes, and we help find an opportunity that works for you. A matching quiz, it gives curated volunteer recommendations based off answers to a few short questions. Something that I see a lot is that people want to volunteer, but they don't know where to start. And again, they might know those big names out in the community, but there are so many nonprofits, hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits that they've never heard of that could be a perfect fit for them. And who we serve the community. So we're not just for nonprofits. We want to be able to serve all sorts of different community groups. We want to be able to serve people who are doing grassroots efforts, or that high school student who has a lot of ambition and has an idea for something, neighborhood associations, sports coaches, faith communities, public agencies, schools, the list goes on and on. So some of the things we want to be able to offer are toolkits and guides for how to organize people effectively. I know of so many free resources out there that I want to be able to get that information out to people and make their jobs easier when it comes to organizing people, especially when they're not doing it, when it's not paid work for them. Mini grants for community-led volunteer projects. This was also inspired by Volunteer Toronto. Being able to offer a few $100s or $1,000 to a neighborhood that decided that they want to build a ramp for their neighbor, or any sort of community project that people have an idea for, they just need a little bit of funding. Social groups and networks centered on volunteering, and citywide service initiatives and community response efforts, which I'll touch on in just a moment. So now that you've learned a little bit about kind of our vision and who we plan to serve, we are very new. So I want to talk about our timeline. We have not yet launched yet. And so sort of our phase one plan is to launch our website and social media. And right now we are tentatively planning for that in September. To engage with the community and to fundraise. So with the launching of our website and social media, the idea is that we want people to be able to sign up for our email list, to be able to sign up for notifications, and we want to take that information over to funders and say, we have 100 nonprofits who are interested in us, help us fund our platform. Phase two is launching our recruitment platform and launching our volunteer navigator program. So sort of the model that we plan to use is a membership model with nonprofits. Every single nonprofit, if you're a registered 501c3, will get a free membership, and that gives you access to our recruitment platform. And then down the line, we hope to offer paid memberships that get you more resources towards volunteer management, whether that's consulting services, more advanced tool guides, access to some classes that we do. We haven't figured all of that out yet, but that's sort of our plan for our membership model. And then phase three is to add and expand programs focused on community engagement, advanced volunteer management, and citywide initiatives. So with that comes sort of our long-term wish list. These are sort of big things that I hope that we can tackle with our organization, but that aren't on our immediate horizon as we launch. The first one is community response alerts. So the idea that so many nonprofits are having to cancel their events, are having to really make some big changes or spend money because they don't have volunteers who are able to come up for an urgent need. So the idea that you could sign up for a text alert, and on Monday we can send you, hey, these nonprofits have not filled their spots and they need help this week, please sign up. A skills database. So whether you're a hairstylist, a barber, a mechanic, a photographer, if you have a special skill that you want to offer nonprofits, this is something that nonprofits don't necessarily think to ask for. And I know this, working in a large volunteer program, we'd often get people with a very unique skill set, and it's something that we wouldn't necessarily advertise for, but we could really use it. So the idea that volunteers can create a profile and list their special skills and check a box that says, yes, I'm open to a nonprofit contacting me if they need a barber to come out and do back to school haircuts. And then the one I'm most excited about is universal applications and background checks. This will be a big logistical obstacle to tackle, but I've been doing a lot of research and I'm very excited about it. But the idea that through our platform, you could fill out one application and one background check, and that could be shared with dozens of nonprofits across the city. applications and background checks are such a huge resource for nonprofits. They cost so much money to run background checks. If you're doing a basic background check, you can get them maybe as cheap as about $25. But if you're doing more involved background checks, if you need a motor vehicle check, if you're running multiple counties, they can cost you over $100 and sometimes hundreds of dollars per volunteer. So it is really cost prohibitive to be able to securely screen your potential volunteers, as well as just the administrative burden of going through so many applications and what that looks like. So we are hoping to kind of take on that burden for ourselves and sort of make this more efficient for everyone that we possibly can. So as we are preparing to launch, sort of what I'm asking people to do that will help us is to really just stay in touch with me. So if you have any feedback, if you have any ideas, if you're a nonprofit who could benefit from this, please feel free to send me an email, send me a text message. I also put a QR code. I'm going to drop the link in the chat as well. This is to our link tree, and it has the links to all of our social media. If you are on social media right now, it's Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you are on any of those platforms, please give us a follow. Again, this is information that I can take to funders and say, we already have this many followers who are ready to engage with us and are engaging with our content already. And pretty soon we're going to be launching an email notification list. It should be by the end of today. So if you want to check back a little bit later, a spot where you can put your email in and you'll get an email notification when we're ready to launch, and you'll be automatically on our email list when we're ready to go. So I will just say thank you so much, and I will turn it back over to Anne so we can do some Q&A.
Thanks, Marty. If the biggest thing that you have given me, so thank you, is hope that you're leading this forward. As you were talking, I'm like, yep, had that thought, have that need, and so many things, coming together and intersecting. I have so many questions, but there are also people here I know who have thoughts and questions. So what I'd like to do is something a little different than what we normally do. Do you still have about 15 minutes to stay with us, Marty?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I kind of like to look at the rest of our time. I'm talking to most of the other folks here, is to think about this more like, I don't know, a collaboration meeting that we've set up with people who are utilizing different volunteer platforms, who are working in community. Everybody here is. Where does the work that Marty has brought forth intersect with the work that you're doing? Where can we help? Where and how can we help each other in terms of, over duplication, replication? I don't know, like if we were coming together and saying, okay, let's all work on volunteerism in San Antonio, what would that conversation sound like? And that's the conversation I'm inviting. So I'll go ahead and start if that's okay with you, Marty. And I encourage folks too that when you're speaking to also describe to Marty and to everybody, where you intersect with what she's talking about, so that Marty can also learn and make those connections. So Marty, a couple years ago brought a bunch of nonprofits together and said, come on, I know that your volunteer list is gold, but is there some way that we can work together and be stronger together and also work more efficiently, more effectively? As Billy Cox would say, raise all the boats, that it makes it also easier for us. One of my dreams in all of that is if something like what you're doing would happen, that everybody who would go through that would also go through some orientation, so that everybody, every volunteer is a volunteer for San Antonio, right? And so no matter whether they're volunteering at the food bank or they're volunteering at your congregation, they also see themselves as a volunteer for the entire community of San Antonio, and then meeting each other and working that way together. So is there any thought in the work that you're doing, Marty, that will have that kind of orientation to community?
Yeah, so one of the ideas I had, and I didn't put it in the presentation, is sort of this collaborative effort around different social issues. So one of the things that I noticed throughout my career, so first working at SAM Ministries, is that a lot of our volunteers applied at SAM Ministries, but they also applied at Haven for Hope. And it really didn't matter to them which organization they applied at. They just wanted to, they wanted to be involved with people experiencing homelessness. They wanted to learn more about the issue. And something that has been so beneficial for me throughout my career has been connecting with other volunteer engagement professionals who are working in that same sector area. So when I was doing this pilot for a volunteer driver program, I reached out to so many different volunteer coordinators who are running volunteer driver programs, other people who are working in healthcare programs. And like you said, there is so much benefit to collaborating there. And there have been times where, I've had an event where we've had a trouble getting filled, and I've reached out to somebody and said, hey, would you mind advertising this to your volunteers for us? And they've been willing to do it. So I'd love to bring some more structure, some more formality to sort of these informal processes that have been happening over the years. I'd love to see like a collaboration between organizations who work on housing and homelessness, and them being able to have like a network where they can share volunteer opportunities with each other, where a volunteer can be knowledgeable of all of the organizations who serve this specific area, and not just the first one that pops up on Google or the first one that they hear. So that is definitely something that I would like to see more of.
Monty, I also encourage you to, thank you, to look at chat. There's been conversation happening about a daughter who has to volunteer, but then also has to go to every nonprofit every year to serve and, go through that process. So what you're talking about is really helpful. David talks about the challenges of volunteer turnover. What are some successful models or best practices? I think you've talked about that a little bit to the volunteer centers, but to keep people engaged. Background checks, what motivates long-term commitment.
I can touch on the long term.
Great.
David's question. I see curious about long term sustainability, and talking about operational challenges with volunteer turnover. I will say, when working with nonprofits, when they tell me that they're having trouble recruiting or retaining volunteers, my first question is not about their social media. It's not about how they're advertising. My first question is about their operations. It's, what does your volunteer application process look like? Are your volunteers knowledgeable about what volunteering entails before they start the process? Do they know the different positions available? Do you have position descriptions? Even just a few sentences about what they're doing. Do they know the time commitment? Do they know the availability that's needed? Are they really educated about that? And what does your application process look like? So from the time I apply, whether that's online, in person, to the time I actually start volunteering, how long does that take? And do you know that number? And how can we get that shorter? Is your orientation and your training, have you audited it to make sure that everything in there is 100% necessary? For instance, I've signed up for a volunteer orientation that was 8 hours long. I don't think it necessarily needed to be 8 hours long. I think that they could have gotten more volunteers had they shortened it to maybe to 6 hours, or even broken it up into 2 different days, or offered virtual options. So there's a huge problem with accessibility when it comes to volunteering as well. And our nonprofits really have not kept up with the way that volunteers want to engage. So the way that Gen Alpha and the way that Gen Z are volunteering is very different than the way that Gen X and baby boomers and even older millennials are volunteering. And we have to be able to adapt sort of not just our opportunities, but the way that we are engaging with them, just from letting them know about what we have available, to our onboarding process, and to the way that we engage with them once they're volunteer with us. So I'm not saying that there's not issues with volunteer turnover, but it's, again, there's a lot of issues here. Most volunteer coordinators I talk to only last 1 to 2 years at an organization. Volunteer programs are chronically underfunded. My last 3 jobs, every single time that I have gone into it, our grant funding for my program has been cut. So there have been places where I have stayed for only 6 months due to that funding. It's just not something that is prioritized in the way that it needs to be. So that's kind of our goal as the volunteer center, is that we know that there's so many limitations, there's so many barriers, and we want to be able to take on that burden as much as we can ourselves and help nonprofits piece by piece build more structurally sound volunteer programs to help retain their volunteers long term, and also help give their volunteer coordinators the education, the tools, the resources that they need so that they're not burning out, so that they have sustainable funding and that they can stay in their positions longer.
Peter, you have your hand up. Thank you, Marty.
Yes, thank you, Ann. And thank you, Marty. Great presentation. I love your mission and vision statement. It's so on point for what you do. And my question is kind of based on what you just shared about the value of a volunteer coordinator position. And I'm in the Life Christian Center, faith-based organization. So I wanted to get your feedback on what you've seen with faith-based organizations, having that as a staff position, because I know that's something that I value, but we don't have it as a staff position. So I really feel like, how can I sell it as this is something we should hire on because of the value that it produces is incredible. I mean, that's the blood of your system, right? And then in faith-based organizations, again, I just wanted to get your perspective on the nonprofit versus faith-based organizations and their commitment to do that, and the funding, right? To be that seed, like, okay, let's get it started. Maybe it goes for 6 months and you have someone hire a year contract, and then show the value, and then using that strategy to build that position. And what you've seen, if you have an assessment already of faith-based and nonprofits and the way that they may do it similarly or differently.
Absolutely. And if you reach out to me by email, there's actually a resource that exists. It's not specifically for faith-based communities, but it is for volunteer coordinators to advocate for their position at the organization, and I'll send that to you. But to speak to it, I think faith-based communities are really at an advantage here because they're volunteers. They have that spiritual connection to it. They have a reason for volunteering that maybe other volunteers out in the community don't have, right? They're not doing it just to check off numbers to graduate or for, court-ordered community service. They're there because they want to be. I also think when you're talking about funding, one of the things I hear often from nonprofits is that volunteers don't donate, but the opposite is true. The data shows us that volunteers actually donate at twice the rate of donors who do not volunteer, and that number has stayed pretty steady throughout the years. So when you are putting resources towards starting a volunteer program, you should also be stewarding them as donors, and you should be sharing the needs of your organization with them. So if you have donation drives, if you have events, or if you're fundraising for something specific at your organization and you're not sharing it with your volunteers, you're really missing out on a huge segment of people. But also volunteer coordinators, they do so much that can also reduce the burden that other staff members or other volunteers are already doing in your community. So, there's a lot of crossover between, soliciting donations, whether it's like in-kind donations, doing donation drives, that ties in so good with volunteers because they can go out into their communities and they can run donation drives. They can help bring those things in for the community. And your volunteers can help in every aspect of your organization. So it's not just what you're doing for the community, whether it's serving meals or running a food pantry, but they can help you internally too. So they can do admin work, they can do data entry. There's so many skilled volunteers out there, so many, retired folks who are like, I've worked this long corporate career and I have these skills. I'm an accountant. I want to be able to come in. They can help you with your accounting. So there's so many options out there. It's just about finding the right people and finding, it can be difficult to kind of sort of navigate that space. So feel free to reach out to me and I can give you some advice if there's specific issues you're dealing with.
No, thank you, Maria. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I might.
Yeah.
So
Go Billy.
Are you aware of the platform Catch a Fire?
I am, and I am a volunteer on Catch a Fire.
Good, excellent. Okay, just want to make sure you see that. I hope you succeed in at least the background check world. I'm a part of about a dozen organizations, and every one of them runs a background check, and I must be the most background checked person in the community. We've also, as SACRD, we were asked by the Comal County folks to put together a diluted form of what you're asking for. Their challenge was they keep getting asked for places to volunteer, and their list was in their drawer. And so they, if you go look on comalcares.org, you'll see a version of this that SACRD put together for them. if there's a way we can collaborate with you to make it stronger for San Antonio, and you've adopted a mission which I think is the right one and much broader, but and we solved a tiny part of that, I'll say, for the Comal folks. So you might take a look at comalcares.org.
That's amazing. Thank you.
I'm wondering too, Billy, and I think Bill's on here as well, but we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago at the intersection, but how these different platforms can intentionally intersect at least so that we grow stronger, of course, but like there might be a link on SACRD that goes to VolunteerSATX and a link at VolunteerSATX that goes to resourcing at the San Antonio Community Resource Directory. And so to do that intentionally, as a community and to help people at least in one next step, right? I also am thinking, is Don Larson on here? No, he's not, but Latter-day Saints nationally has a platform, JustServe, that's all about volunteerism, both locally, nationally, yeah. And we've been using that some. People locally have been using that some more than others. Are you familiar with JustServe?
I am, yes.
Good. I'm trying to figure out, and I really want others to speak. I'm trying to figure out how we can best dovetail and intersect the work that you're doing with the work that's already happening, and simplify as much as we can, and early on. The earlier, the better, right? Alice has her hand up. Thank you for saving me, Alice. Speak.
Hey, Marty, this is fabulous. I love it. And Jane can speak to what I'm gonna say as well. Um, I don't know if you've heard of collective impact. It's a model on how to do exactly what Anne was talking about, how to kind of bring everybody together. I put some links there in the chat, but how do you wrangle the cats? Because it's very complex. You've got to, community engagement, you've got to change mental models, you've got to, bring people together in a very purposeful way. And at first, it looks like a giant mess of string. And then little by little, that gets pulled out and people find their place and stuff. But that may be something you want to look at. They have podcasts and they have all kinds of easy ways to start kind of getting that information to help you, take it from where you've got it and to what Anne is talking about, dovetailing everybody else in and giving them purpose within that initiative. So it may be something you want to look into. And I'm going to be selfish and take a second. I also put a note in the chat that Franklin Apartments needs volunteers to help their seniors pack because they're moving them and they've got all the moving stuff good, but they need moving supplies and they need packers. So I put an email in there, or you can contact me if y'all are interested in helping people move. So thank you for letting me be selfish.
Hi, this is Julie from University Hospital. I'm sorry, I'm in my car, so I can't raise my hand. Just quick, can SACRD have a portal for volunteers that links all these platforms together? In addition to, as you're talking about, having them work together, but couldn't there be a portal for both volunteers and those who need volunteers, linking everybody? And my other thing is suggesting hospital volunteer programs. We had a program in our palliative care department. We could have used somebody that with grief and bereavement skills, and that maybe to work with hospital programs to help them. That's it. Thanks.
So for the SACRD side, we absolutely can, at the minimum, we can list that they exist and put them in a category for volunteering. That's the easy part. We love doing that because that creates a connection. As to putting together a portal, that's more like what Marty's doing. So I think we ought to find a way to collaborate and make that a strong solution.
Yep. But I think that raises our last question and our last minute, unless Bill wants to say something. But like, what's our next step in this conversation and moving it forward? I don't have that answer right now, but
I can make a quick comment if there's time.
good.
I want to say I think Mari, what you've done is your objective is really significant, and I think that if you look at SACRD is an ecosystem platform, right? That was built for helping people navigate to resources. The volunteer thing that we did in Comal County was created by a collaboration of volunteers but with the input and advice of the nonprofits themselves, right? It does not go as far as what you're doing. I mean, one thing definitely that SACRD does not get involved with is single events, right? So we just don't have the bandwidth to create and to find those things, document them, and maintain them. That is a huge amount of work, right? And so we try to look for kind of permanent volunteer resources. And then this kind of inefficiency that Billy was talking about with the background checks, if you could solve that, that would be huge, right? And so I think that while there's maybe a little overlap in some of our intentions between what we're doing at SACRD and what you're doing, I don't think they're duplicative. And I think that we could certainly find a way to collaborate with each other and help move this forward, because there are things you're talking about that SACRD has no interest in being involved in that need to be solved. The background check thing and so forth is key. I think I've seen people work on that a few times over the years, and it is just a morass of legal problems, right? And
Yes.
particularly if you get involved with kids in the organization, I mean, we won't go into it here, but it is exceedingly complicated. And if you could get a collaborative of these organizations to go in on a solution, I think that alone would probably sustain your program. And I think you're right to focus on this from, what do the agencies receiving the nonprofits need, right? And then in addition, how do you make it easy for the people that want to provide that to find it, right? So it's got to be, this is a marketplace application. It's not a public facing volunteer thing for people to find volunteer jobs. It's not a place for nonprofits to post their events. It's both, right? So marketplaces have to exist when the buyers and the sellers both come. That has to be artificially created at the beginning. And that's kind of sounds like what you're doing, and you have the background to do it. So SACRD's done this in a different context, and I'd love to collaborate and help you out any way we can, because I think that there's a lot of synergy, if you can use that horrible word, to describe what that we can work on here. So I'd sent you a note earlier, so I'll follow up with that, and maybe we can get together and chat more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just want to touch on something you said, that we're not necessarily duplicative, but we're focusing on some of the same things. And I've come across other organizations or other collaboratives in the community where they're really focused on volunteering maybe for a specific demographic, whether that's for students or older adults or for corporations. I don't want to, we're not going to dive deep into any of these demographics and really kind of dig that hole there. We really want to be that broad serving community resource, and we want to be that hub for all things volunteer. So if there are other organizations that you know of or other people doing similar work, please connect them with us, because we would love to uplift them on our platform as well.
And so we're going to sign off.
I'll give you one last piece of advice. We put San Antonio in our name 7 years ago, and it has caused us some problems. So it's so I would just before you get too deep into this, maybe you have a cup of coffee and ruminate on that.
That's good to know. Thank you.
All right. Good luck. I'll look forward to talking to you later.
Great. Marty, do you have a regular meeting time with nonprofits that you've been working with or anything?
I don't. It's been sort of piecemeal now. I've been networking all summer. So you've been at a networking event, we might have crossed paths this summer. So that's what I've been doing, is trying to get the word out about our organization. I do hope that once we launch our website and social media, that we can put something more formal in place, because like I said, we'd like to get some data up front. We'd like to get community feedback as we start building our recruitment portal and start building out our services. And it's also important for us as we write grants and talk to funders as well, to we know exactly what the community wants from us.
Great. I think I've been hanging around SACRD too long, because oddly, I understood everything you talked about. And 10 years ago, I wouldn't have. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for this morning, and thank you, Marty, for giving me so much hope. I hope it's given others hope as well. So great to see all of you next week. We're going to have a conversation about tangled titles and what that means for all of us, and especially as we age forward. So see you all next week at the intersection. Have a great day. It's been hot. Stay cool, and hope you have great weekends. We'll see you next Thursday at the intersection. Bye.
Thanks, Mari.
Thank you.